Jason, we had yet another good weekend of NBA basketball. Just so you guys know, as we record this, the Nets and the Bucks are tied in the series. My Hawks, shocker alert. A real shocker alert. My Hawks are down 2-1. But they play tonight in Philly. I'll be in the building, so we shall see what happens with that. Clip City is also trying to come from under a 2-1 lead from the Jazz. But
do it again.
The story of the day, the week, the everything are the Suns sweeping the Nuggets. How about Chris Paul, man? I mean, there were MVP chants from the fans. The Phoenix team had pandemonium when they arrived back home. What are your thoughts? Did you think that they would? Actually, I almost predicted this, Jason. You remember? I almost said they were going to get swept, and I'm like, let me not be so aggressive.
We both, to our credit, just to toot our own horns, we both picked the Suns to win. Same as you. I had too much respect for the Nuggets to think that it would be like this, but it indeed was like this. And as you noted, Chris Paul, the engine behind a lot of what happened. Listen, can't ignore Devin Booker's emergence as a top tier playoff scorer, and DeAndre Ayton basically evolving before our eyes. But Chris Paul, as my friend Zach Harper said, maybe the Nuggets should have just put somebody on the elbow and not guard Chris Paul, but just guard the spot. Because he's just getting to that spot and hitting fadeaway after fade, hit 6 mid-range jumpers in the third quarter of Game 4. And, the irony of Chris Paul taking the shot that has been reviled in the modern NBA game and using it to dismantle the Nuggets, it should not be lost on anybody.
In the first half, Jason, he had 12 points in the whole first half, talking about Chris Paul. In the third quarter alone, at a certain point, he was 5 for 5, had 10 points right away. And to your point, that shot that Chris Paul is making a lot, Trae Young is getting all he can eat in that same area. It's that area that you're talking about floater, where it's threes or it's layups. That in-between mid-range game is almost like it doesn't exist. Defenses aren't ready for it. Trae Young lives in that whole area. That's where he throws the alley-oop or he shoots his floater. So Chris Paul sees it, knows it's part of his game, and was lethal.
It's been interesting. We've kind of been waiting for this to happen, right? It's the emergence of the three-pointer as a spacing weapon has changed the way the game is played. It's changed the way defenses are played because now, all NBA defenses that are worth anything are based around running you off that 3-point line. They want to run them. They want to run shooters off that line, and you'll give up the 2 rather than give up the open 3. And so the counter to that revolution has always been who can convert in the mid-range at a high level. Chris Paul is I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's in the 97th percentile. I think he's shooting about 50% from mid-range.
Yeah,
and if you can do that, all of a sudden you have a weapon that NBA defenses are made to give up. They'll give it to you. Yeah. That's yours. You can have that shot.
That's the shot they want you to take. And I want to ask you about something. How do you feel about the MVP of the league getting ejected on a flagrant 2 when the game was tight in a closeout game to end his season?
Okay. I thought if it was March, it's absolutely a fair call, and I would have expected it. I was a little surprised in a closeout game in the second round of the playoffs, and I also feel like maybe this is just my own. I don't think there's any way in hell that LeBron James gets ejected for the exact same thing in the exact same situation.
Interesting.
That said, I think it was a flagrant and it was ejectable. The windup was there. It was clear that Jokic was upset about not getting a foul call right before that, and they were losing at home, and he got frustrated and he wound up. There was no reason to wind up.
Jason, there's no way you think but that's not a flagrant 2. They had the luxury, and this is the thing I always say, when it's a bang bang play, charge or a foul. If the refs make a bad call in the game, it's like they don't have the luxury of a replay. They had the luxury. That to me is the softest flagrant 2 I might have ever seen in a game of that magnitude. Yes, he wound up. Yes, he hit him above the shoulders. Flagrant 1, easy call. But she said something very interesting. A lot of people were talking about, is the Joker considered one of those superstars? Because if you're one of those superstars, there's no way you get thrown out on your MVP campaign. And so that's where the NBA people don't like. They don't like that there's different rules maybe for different people. That's how some people feel. So that's what was interesting. If
that happened in March, you'd be fine with the ejection, right?
Yep.
Same here.
I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was a flagrant 2 though in March. I'm saying I don't even want them to call flagrant 1s as easy as they call them. Me personally, like, I think that the physicality of the game, I'm not saying we go back to the Bad Boys days with Bill Laimbeer and all of them and beat each other up. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's okay to have a little physicality in basketball.
Let me ask you this as just a devil's advocate. Now, I agree with you. I was absolutely shocked when they ejected him. Like, totally shocked. From the ref's perspective, okay, tempers are getting hot. It looks like Denver could get swept here. I want to make sure things don't progress from this. Like, I want to stop it right here. Is that a basis for making that call, or do you find some other way to warn the players to say, hey, listen,
absolutely not.
I know you're emotional, but let's put a break on it?
Absolutely not. What you do in that situation is you call a flagrant 1, and then what all refs do when there's a little scuffle or there's something spicy that happens, you start calling the game close. You start letting them know, all right, clean it up. So if somebody wants to come down and it looks like they want to do something and call a quick foul, you call a quick foul on the other end. You let them know we're not doing this. But you don't throw out the MVP of the whole league on a foul like that. I don't care if it wasn't the MVP. You don't throw somebody out on that type of foul.
Let's go through it. Do they call that on KD?
No.
Do they call that on James Harden?
I don't even remember James Harden fouling. He doesn't even, does he foul? Does he? I don't know.
They would just be so shocked that he ever fouled anybody.
I mean, I don't know if he's leaned in on defense enough to get that scrappy, so probably not, I would have to say.
Rudy Gobert / Donovan Mitchell, do they call it?
Ooh. That depends. I think they might call it on Rudy Gobert. I think they might call it on a Draymond Green. I think
they would. I think that would be a reputation foul for Draymond Green.
Yes. And and so that's what people were talking about again. The reputation of the Joker is not to be this malicious guy. He even went and apologized afterwards.
He went and apologized right away.
Right away, because a flagrant 2 pretty much by definition means you had intent to harm almost. Like, it's the wind up and it's the intent to cause injury. So when they called a flagrant 2 on the Joker, he went up to Cameron Payne and was like, yo, I didn't mean to do that. I
will say that when you watch it too, he's looking at the ball all the way. Like, he gets them he gets Cam with his like bicep. He's trying to smack the ball real hard.
He hits
but he's
the ball.
He's
but
definitely
his
not
arm
trying
hits the face.
Yes. Trae Young, would they again another? Definitely I don't remember him fouling anybody except for Ben Simmons, except for Ben recently trying to get those shots from the line, trying to get that 50% from the line.
Oh my gosh! Don't even bring that up. But yeah, I think that Trae's too small for them to call that on him. I think that it's like me. When I played in the WNBA, I was way smaller than a lot of the players I played against. So we have a little free range to get a little hit in there every now and then because the rest is like, oh, that didn't hurt anybody. So no, I don't think they call that on Trae for sure.
Another question. If Joker seems like sorry right away, because he really just kind of walked away and was like, what? He had no reaction to it. He was not like visibly angry or upset, but he definitely walked away like nothing happened. There was a brief scrum with him and Devin Booker going chest to chest. That's normal stuff. But he did not seem like upset about it or looking to apologize in any way. If he had done that, if he had seemed more contrite in the 2 minutes before the verdict was announced, do you think he stays in the game?
I do. You've seen players that when they foul hard and they catch the player, like if a defender fouls hard, They kind of catch the offensive player, make sure he doesn't fall hard. And then even if he does fall, they kind of come over to him like, you good. I do think that has some type of effect on the ref's psyche about how it happened. I mean, you see it into Draymond Green is one that does that all the time. Yeah, he might commit a very hard foul. And he'll catch you. Yep, and then he'll catch you. Make sure it doesn't, because it's the fall. I mean, you got to give Cameron Payne a lot of credit. He laid on the ground. He
stayed there.
I mean, and not to say, I'm sure it did hurt, but I mean, he was on the ground in pain, visibly.
I thought his eyeball popped out. I wasn't sure what happened.
Yeah, I thought he was going to come up. I thought blood was going to be all over the towels when the trainers came over. And then he just kind of got up and walked back to the bench mad. But I think that has an effect as well. You know, sometimes players lay on the ground until the refs say they're going to review it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that I obviously would not have changed the outcome. It was a close game, but Denver was trending like they were going to lose. But I do think that if he would have not just like stepped over Cam and walked away from it, like he immediately gets in a beef with Devin Booker right there. But if he would have been like, oh, try to catch him or just put a hand out, like, are you okay? I think that it's a flagrant one. I agree with you.
Speaking of fouling hard, Steve Nash came out with a statement that said that he thinks some of the fouls on Kevin Durant were borderline not basketballish, something of that nature. And so first of all, are you shocked that we are sitting here? You already said it, so I know you are. 2-2, but with the injuries, how does that make this series look to you?
First of all, I am shocked. If you lose 2 games, the opening 2 games of a playoff series, okay, not that big a deal. You got blown out in the opening 2 games of a playoff series. With the second game, they were behind by like almost 50 points, 49 points at one point. It looked
That's
like
crazy.
A complete rollover. Now, regarding Durant, here's the thing. First of all, I don't agree with Steve Nash, but I do think that this is a thing this is a kind of gamesmanship that he just has to do. With Harden out, with Kyrie out for we don't know how long, you're now depending on Kevin Durant, 32 years old, coming off an Achilles, to be your do-everything guy. And I just think you have to find ways to limit the amount of minutes that he plays and the amount of physical burden put on him. And if one of those things is to complain about the refs, about the contact, maybe get him on the line more and slow down the play and put less on KD's odometer, I think it's just something you have to do. I don't agree with what Nash is saying, but I think he has to say this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the same where you'll see a coach get a technical in the game, and you can tell that the coach wanted that technical.
He was
going after that technical to fire his team up. It's the same way. You got to protect your players, though. And if he knows that Kevin Durant is mad about the fouls, well, you have to protect him. The big 3 went to the big 1 in a hurry, though.
It went real fast.
Now with Kevin Durant, we don't know how long for Kyrie Irving. James Harden, we know that hamstring injury has him out for a couple weeks. What are your thoughts on this series that's tied 2-2?
I don't know what to think anymore. I think it was clear that the Nets were cruising to victory in this. If it's just going to be KD, I think the Nets are obviously still capable of winning this. But it's going to take a lot from Durant. It's going to take a lot on both ends. And it's going to take someone else being the person who steps up and gets them 25 points. And is that going to be Joe Harris? Is that who has not been playing well? Is that going to be Jeff Green, who may not play? Who is that going to be? That's the question mark. Because, as shaky as the Bucks looked in their first 2 games, and they looked bad. They looked completely out of it. They look completely unlike the team they were in the regular season, or even the first round of the playoffs. They know they're basically whole, except for Dante DiVincenzo, and they know what they're going to do. They know where they're getting their points from. They know how they
their
want to play.
rotations.
All of that. The Nets are in uncharted waters at this point, and now this is why you get multiple superstars. But when you're down to your last one, it doesn't feel good. What do you think? And then, are you a little? I guess I'm not surprised, but are you a little surprised at the almost the glee that people reacted with when Kyrie went out and all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, Katie's seeing what it's like now.
I was just about to say that. So it's interesting because Kevin Durant's knock from the fan base has been, oh, he likes joining super teams and he left his team to join the Golden State Warriors and now he's with another super team with the Brooklyn Nets. I think that this is a huge opportunity for Kevin Durant. Not that he has to prove anything to anyone because we know he's one of the best players to ever play. It's like, it's done deal. We know he's that good. But a lot of people have so much to say about him being a part of the super teams. So if Kevin Durant can basically carry the Nets for how many ever games that it takes Kyrie to get back, James Harden to get back, I think that that's going to do a lot for KD. Not that he has to do it, not that he needs to do it, but right. I think that I think the knock that fans are saying is they think he doesn't want to do it. So, or that he maybe can't do it, or he's afraid to do it. So this will be a big time for Kevin Durant because we've seen LeBron James carry some not so great teams really far into the playoffs. We've seen it happen multiple times. So this is a big opportunity, I think, for KD to just tell everybody, be quiet.
I agree. And, you know, the injury thing, I think, is important to think about. LeBron, of course, has carried numerous leaky rosters to the finals over the course of his career. He's also been, like, as close to an Iron Man in his career as you can get.
Absolutely.
Right? KD coming off an Achilles. Kyrie, I mean, just look at the games played over the course of his career. He always misses games. He's, it's very rare, like let me look at it, but he's a guy that has been bedeviled by injuries over the course of his career. James Harden is a guy who, because of the way the Rockets played, always ends up either out of gas or banged up at the end of the season. That's the reason they all joined together. I think it if anything, the injuries makes Kevin Durant's decision to come here even more defensible. Again, coming off of an Achilles and needing that insurance if he's going to get another chance at it. And same with Harden, same with Kyrie. There's two other guys who have struggled with fitness over the course of their careers.
Is it?
But I was like really kind of I guess. Nothing in sports really should surprise, but I was a little bit surprised with the way people were like, now Katie's going to see.
The fans have been shocking me this season. I'm sorry. Like, I don't care. I'm one of the most competitive people. You guys see me on Take Survivor. I take it all serious. You should see me playing board games, Taboo. It doesn't matter what I'm playing. I'm competitive. But I think there's a fine line in between being competitive and then like you're booing for someone that got hurt. I don't see that.
I don't like that at all.
I don't see that as being competitive. I don't see that as being acceptable. We've seen the fans from New York spit on a Trae Young and throw stuff on players, Russell Westbrook. I don't
one
like
fan.
This. Yeah, it was
terrible.
one fan,
it was
but it's a lot of different
terrible.
Instances that are happening. And it's like fans, I want fans to be like, super competitive, super into it, but then just don't cross that line. I think that's the thing for me. It's like certain things, like if a player's down and hurt, I think the gym should like have like a quietness about it, hoping that they're okay. I don't care who it is, the opponent or not. That's just me. But speaking of the fans that spit on Trae Young, tonight we have a game back in State Farm Arena. As I said, I'll be in the building. Philadelphia stole one last game the same way we stole one. Yeah, we don't like to give up stuff. I say stole one because until that point, we had defended home court. We had won like, I don't even know how many games in a row. I think it was like
going
14
back to
or
the
15.
regular season.
Yeah, we had, and then going even into New York. We won both of those games in the playoff at home. So we hadn't really lost a game at home in a while. So that's why I call it stealing. But yes, they handled us. They won by a good margin. I do know that.
What has Philly done? Obviously, they've shifted Ben Simmons. They've asked him to take the responsibility of trying to slow down Trae Young, trying to get the ball out of his hands quicker, trying to keep him from getting it. Tybal has been in there as well. But what have they found from your perspective that's allowed them to kind of blunt the Hawks' extremely sharp and dangerous offense?
I think that they're making a lot of our players not named Trae Young playmakers. So a lot of times Trae was the one off the pick and roll, finding the shooter, finding the alley-oop, getting his floater. Well, now they're basically putting a bigger defender on him, which I don't necessarily know if that's what slows him down more so than they're making now a red velvet, which is Kevin Huerter.
Yeah.
They're making John Collins put the ball on the floor. They're making our players make plays when normally they're catching and shooting. Yes, they can come. Yes, red velvet can play one-on-one, no problem. But to have to keep doing it over and over and then make a play, that's just not how we've been functioning. What do you see?
I mean, I think it's that. I think the bigger body. Zach Lowe talked about this on his recent podcast, and it's with Kevin Arnovitz. It's not so much that they're stopping Trae, although the Hawks have shot poorly from three, which is just a thing that happens sometimes. It's that the Hawks have such a beautiful motion offense when it is going, and it is so tightly timed, like music, But like music, if you can slow down one aspect of the symphony, it all kind of changes. Everything changes. People aren't in the perfect spot anymore. Now the defender has an extra beat to close out, and everything looks a little bit different. That window gets a little bit smaller. And Trae Young, as a player who is, I think, very generously listed at 6'1", it's all about, his game is all about windows, about creating windows. The way he comes off a pick and roll and will stop so that people run into him, so that he can create these spaces, and the way defenders react to that move now, so that even amplifies the space. If you can you don't have to close the window, because I think Trae's too good you can't shut him off. But if you can close the window a little bit, he is so central to everything the Hawks do that it just throws the symphony off. Now the musicians are reading from different
and we're
sheets
missing
of music.
DeAndre Hunter.
Which
too.
Was really sucked.
That's huge. Even when we lost him in the regular season, he's our guy that guards the other team's best player, even if that's a post player or a guard. He was our do-it-all man. We don't have that glue guy. Yes, we didn't have him for a lot of points in the season, but would we be able to handle New York the way we did without him? Absolutely not. So we don't have the firepower that we did have in that New York series, but we got to hear the music play. I want to hear the music play tonight in State Farm Arena, okay?
Those earthquakes you felt today were the Athletic's Tim Cato dropping a report regarding the influence of one Haralbob Voulgaris, the director of quantitative research and development, and a former NBA gambler and quant. The story alleges, among other things, that Haralbob basically runs the Mavericks organization, going so far as to dictate lineups to coach Rick Carlisle. Mark Cuban recently came out against the report, which he tweeted was, quote, bullshit. Tim Cato, thank you for joining us. How are you feeling today? And tell us about this crazy story that you have written.
Yeah, man, it's out there. It's been an interesting day. I think that's safe to say. Love some good front office news. Now, I mean, I've been hearing about this for a while. It's not new. I mean, even go back. Let's talk about their playoff series for a second. Like, if your star player scores 46 and 14 in a game 7 and you're not competitive in the final minute, that is an indictment on the front office. It is a direct indictment on them. And I was building up details and talking to people and had heard a lot even before the series, and a week later was ready to publish it. But I think this is a broad indictment on the front office. It focuses, the details obviously focus on Bob, and as I knew they would, that is the understandable and correct takeaway. But I think it's also an indictment on all involved to a degree, that league sources, league executives were confused about who had power in Dallas, confused who to talk to, weren't sure if Mark Cuban, was the person mostly running the team. As a source told me in the article, Mark Cuban is the most powerful person in the organization, but whoever he's listening to is second. And over the years, who that second person is something that's definitely changed over time. And while also, the power structures there within, have mostly stayed the same. Someone like Donnie Nelson has been the general manager for about 16 years. So I think that there certainly is fault all the way around, and it just shows in the playoff series. If you can't get help around Luka, then yeah, there's a chance he's going to leave. As I reported, it's not what he's feeling right now, but it's a concern. It's a concern people have, and nobody wants to look back in 5 years and say, "Oh, we had Luka Doncic and we messed that up." Nobody wants to do that, and so I think that's where a lot of the reporting and the through lines of this story stemmed from.
You mentioned Donnie Nelson being there for 16 years. Of course, his dad was also the coach and was also heavily involved in the front office. I think one of the hallmarks of Mark Cuban's time as owner of the Dallas Mavericks is the really uncommon stability of the core decision makers within the Dallas Mavericks. 16 years is a long time to be in the front office for any sports organization. What does that say about the way that Mark likes to run things?
Right. I mean, in another 13 years for Carlisle, another person talked about in the piece, it does seem like he trusts people and hangs on to them and maybe hangs on to them too much. I'm the reporter for this story. I certainly didn't have any end game in mind. It's actually just something I really try not to think about because, I don't want to, I don't want to be doing anything that I write or publish, with an endpoint. It's not why I'm here. But, it does, now that with the story published, with the idea of everything that's gone down, it's definitely a good time to really examine the power structure. And if Bob, was their attempt to change things up and bring in a new voice, and a new voice, to be clear, that I think had some good ideas. I generally think that if me and him sat down, we'd probably agree on a lot of stuff about basketball. I do think a spread pick and roll, analytics driven team around Luka makes some sense. That makes a lot of sense. But the way that they implemented this clearly did not work. I think the story, I think it's pretty clear from the story that, if you have this many people and players and, people around the league are hearing about this and sharing details and, know deeply about everything that has gone on, that points to a front office that, is not cohesive and not operating and does not have synergy and is just not working the way it should. And in another year, that would be a bad thing. When you have Luka Doncic and when the timeline is ticking and as, the clock is going as a major, power broker in the league, said in the story, the Mavericks understand that. And so the time to figure this out is probably 2 years ago, but the time is definitely now. The time is definitely now. There's no more time to waste with these unclear lines of power and who actually runs things, who does what, etc.
Well, you talk about it, Tim. You said Luka is that star player, and in the NBA, we know the importance that those star players hold. Now, with the Mavs getting knocked out in back-to-back seasons in the first round of the playoffs, how do you think that star player of Luka is handling that?
Yeah, I mean, he wants to win, obviously. We didn't report that he is out here trying to flex his influence on the team, and I think that's an important thing to note. I think if he had wanted to, he could have, just not said he was going to sign the extension on exit interviews, even if he still planned to. But that said, every decision an NBA team makes when they have a star player like this, it runs through their star player. It's not a Luka thing. It's how the NBA works. You can only put 5 players on the court at the same time. When you have a player of Luka's caliber, you're always thinking about, okay, what is he going to want? What is the best decisions to make around him? How do we make sure that he is okay with what we're doing on this team? And so I think that's another thing that I've come back to, and in the process of reporting the story is that he's good right now. He doesn't like that he lost 2 years in a row, but he's good right now. He wants a winning team. He wants a playoff team. He really loves Dirk Nowitzki. Like that is a huge through line to his time in Dallas. And there's a lot of goodwill that this franchise and team and people involved have built up with a player who just seamlessly took the franchise mantle from Dirk to him. And it's the fear that could be undone if things continue the same way that I think led to the story coming out and being something that I was able to report on. But really something that was always going to be an issue, whether reported on or not. It really felt like a lot of these issues were coming to head this summer. No matter what I said, no matter what anybody said, it would have come out from another source or another way, because it really does, like, people around the league have an understanding that.
Well, you mentioned that, like, how pervasive these kind of like whispers were around the league, and just to show you, I am not like a connected person at all, but like I heard from various people who would know things that, like, part of those whispers are people within the organization blaming Bob on some level for the Kristaps Luka rift, if such a thing is real.
You're coming for my job, huh?
No, I'm just saying that's the thing that I've heard. Like, are people also saying that? Like, we're also in the stage of this where it seems like, because Bob is so secretive, and who would have guessed that an isolated gambler who made his money on the internet and doesn't speak or do interviews would have problems communicating. We're also at the stage of this, because Bob doesn't give interviews, that like you can just like dump everything on him and see, and you know he's not going to come back at you. But that is another thing. Like, is that something that you've heard, or, you know, in the course of your reporting, did you hear anything about the Kristaps Luka rift being ascribed to, or being in part his fault, Bob's fault?
I heard people speculate and talk about that. Yeah, I don't think it's true. If it is, it wasn't something I was able to report at a veracity level that I felt anywhere comfortable running with.
Yeah.
Obviously, those two have had issues, and there's been some reporting about them. You know, that is out there, and does kind of talk about the way that KP viewed himself, or maybe still views himself, as the 1B star, and Luka obviously and accurately doesn't. Yeah, I could see how that would cause some tension. Perhaps there's more to it. Certainly, it's something I'd report if I got more on it. But you know, it was surprising as I went into the story and reported more. I did expect to hear more about KP, and I really didn't. I mean, it's still a huge question for the Mavericks, but you know, as far as KP goes, I think he's actually, you know, just seeing him in post-game interviews and things like that, he's tried really hard to be the good soldier, if you will. Talked a lot about how he was, you know, okay being the decoy in the first round series defeat to the Clippers. So, you know, we know what his reputation in New York was, and I haven't seen that. That's all I can say, is that I haven't seen that reputation of him or his agent brother, you know, trying to stir up stuff behind the scenes. Maybe it's out there. Maybe, you know, somebody else is, you know, maybe you're breaking it tomorrow, for all I know.
Yeah, I'm definitely not breaking it.
But yeah, weirdly enough, you know, I understand why you would ask that. I really do, because it's something to a degree I thought would come up during the course of this recording, and it didn't. So that's I found that interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And as a co-owner of another professional team, the Atlanta Dream, I find it very fascinating because Bob comes from the world of gambling. Now, do you see that as a potential conflict of interest here, or is it an asset, seeing where the sports world is going in terms of betting, sports betting?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that it's obviously taking over in a lot of ways. A conflict of interest, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, the idea is that he has stopped gambling since joining the team, and there is zero reason for me to report otherwise. I don't have any evidence or anything saying otherwise. I'll leave that up for people to speculate on. Again, like, you know, I haven't heard of it being an interest or a conflict of interest. But yeah, the idea that analytics just generally, and the idea that there are people who have a very data-driven approach to sports, who are increasingly in locker rooms communicating to players, and often, as we've heard about maybe a million times over the past 2 decades, especially the past decade, they don't, you know, really communicate it well. And there is such a value in that go-between who can translate what the stats and the analytics and the modern sports landscapes of how the sports are being played. You know, there's a lot of value in people who can translate that. And that was another thing that kept coming up, is that, you know, Bob wasn't the right person to translate that. And that when he was around players, that, you know, they really didn't appreciate the way that he tried to.
What is an example, if you could give one? I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated to know what an example of this is.
Oh.
If you can't, you can't, but it's hilarious to me.
Man, there's one that comes to mind I want to share, but I just don't think it's fair or
the example you have in your story. Right. The example you have in your story is a play against, I believe it's the Golden State Warriors, where Luka made a turnover and then Bob seemed to gesture from his courtside seat, and this was interpreted by Luka as Bob telling Luka to calm down or something to that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good one. I would say, Bob says it was a miscommunication, or sources say Bob says that. I don't have him on the record in the story. It may have been, maybe it was an honest mistake. The idea specifically about that incident, it was obviously the lead story or the lead anecdote in the story. That was not the beginning of their relationship being, going sour, and it wasn't the end of it either. So, as much as I thought that was demonstrative and telling of what this story was about, it's also interesting that, it wasn't just one miscommunication that Luka harbored some grudge on. Like, this is, consistently just did not appreciate the supposed influence of this of this person in the front office, of Bob. And other players also kind of viewed that as, okay, Rick listens to him, whether Rick is just adapting to save his job, right, or whatever the reasoning is behind it. Rick is someone who has these very rigid rotations that are recommended to him, by Bob, at minimum recommended to him. And then he's in a situation, these players are in a situation where they feel like, even the person who is entrusted with coaching them, they aren't even sure if this person, really has his own, his own say or his own, complete control of dictating things exactly as he sees fit. And yeah, that's going to lead to issues. I mean, again, I feel like we've singled out, 3 or 4 or 5 different issues, I think, in this chat. It's not a singular thing. It's not a singular person. And I guess, if I had one takeaway from the story that, I think is worth making that is broader than just like, oh, look at this gambler dude. It's that there's a lot of fracturing stuff around the team in a lot of ways. And this is when you got to fix it. This is when you got to figure it out. Because Luka's not going to be around forever if you don't.
Luka has hinted that he will sign the $200 million Supermax extension. I mean, obviously, if it comes down to Luka or Bob, like it's a no-brainer, correct? Like I feel crazy to even say this.
Right. I mean, yeah. Luka, like we said, I don't think he's actively wielding his influence. I think that would be, a stretch too far. But the idea that he is not the most powerful person in the organization, he is. And so, you make the moves that he sees fit to make.
Just one more thing that I'm kind of fascinated about. It's not really a question, just kind of an observation. But like, it seems like the downfall of Sam Hinkie was in part in Philadelphia, was in part, politics, but also this kind of perception that he did not explain what he was doing. He wasn't in the media saying, this is why we're doing the process. This is why it's, and I think, history has borne out that the process was successful in the way that it was acquiring talent. And I see the same thing kind of happening right now with Bob. Like, he's not here to defend himself. He's not on the record in your story. He's not saying anything. It feels like one of the lessons from both of those stories, these very analytically driven people who are valued by organizations but don't want to explain necessarily what they're doing, is that in a highly collaborative environment like a sports front office, you kind of have to have that skill. That's an important skill as pushing numbers around, right? Is saying, here's why I think this, and here's why we should do it, I think. Is that accurate? Would you say that's
it was
correct?
Definitely, I would definitely say it's accurate that was an observation, not a question.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on there. I think that is a through line that we've seen consistently, is that front offices have a lot of, they have a lot more accountability in a lot of ways, that people, it's no longer that you just have a beat writer writing in a newspaper who will say the name of the GM. It's certainly more complicated than that. And, like I said, Bob was someone who is a public figure, where, most people on this podcast, most people listening to this probably saw him through Bill Simmons and being his appearances on that show. And so, there's also questions. There's also people wondering. There's more there's just more curiosity around the league. There's more ability for things to spread and be talked about and shared. And it's kind of the sport we live in, we work in. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, you can make an argument it's not, but that's the NBA. And when you have this much money and moneyed interest and competing interest in all these ways, kind of lined up against each other, it is inevitable that, clashes and things like this will happen, especially if, the through lines and the power structures and the dynamics that are at play, are just not, if they're working against someone and they think they can get an upper hand by kind of pointing out where things are going wrong. Like that's been happening consistently throughout sports media for a while now. So that wasn't really a question or an answer. It was kind of a,
but it was
just kind of talked
more
around.
Of a statement. Yeah, but I enjoyed it. He's Tim Cato.
No, it was amazing.
Yeah.
No, I love hearing it because, I see beat writers all the time, but we're going to let you go. He's Tim Cato of The Athletic. Go check out his article and read his coverage of the Mavs and follow him on Twitter at Tim_Cato. Tim, thanks for joining us on Takeline.
Thanks, guys.